Recently, I have been receiving quite a lot of comments saying that the Western media is having quite a lot of propaganda against Russia and that the Western media is depicting Russia as something evil. But I've been reflecting on that and I was thinking, isn't it the same in Russia? Isn't Russian media depicting the Western countries as something evil? Let's find it out. So let's see how the Russian media is depicting the Western countries and specifically European countries. The Russian media is trying their best to convince Russians that the Russian traditional values are the best in the world, are the most true in the world, and that traditional values are serving for family values, are serving to secure family values in Russia. Of course, that is a single topic for a single video. Let's focus on traditional values. And of course, as a Russian citizen, I can see that the family values in Russia are not so strong nowadays as they were before. For example, take one example from my life. So this year I visited Bulgaria, and I stayed in quite a small hotel, not very small, not very big. So there were mostly the foreigners, of course, because Russians are quite banned nowadays from traveling, and not so many Russians nowadays have the money to travel. So there were almost no Russians in that hotel, only me and maybe a couple of others. So there were a lot of other people from European countries, and I spotted a group of people which consisted of parents and their children, their small children, teenagers, and young adults. In their early 20s. So those children, teenagers, and young adults were, people with disabilities. As far as I could understand, they had cerebral paralysis. And you know what I saw? During breakfast, that group of people gathered together. They were discussing something between themselves, and they were Germans. I know German, I can understand German, so they were Germans, that is for sure. So they used to discuss something with all together with their big group, like maybe it was like 15 people, and they were laughing, they were cheerful, even those disabled children, and I also saw them by the pool having time together. I saw them by the beach. They swam in the sea with those disabled children and young adults and teenagers. And if we start comparing this to Russia, I can't remember the last time that I saw a group of people like that, or even a single family with a disabled people having time together out of their apartment somewhere, in the city. And when I was in Sochi last year, when I visited Sochi, I stayed in quite a big hotel. There were 8,000 people in that hotel, and I didn't see any single family with a disabled child. So I don't know. I think that this German family value is quite good, actually, when you have disabled people in your family and you spend time together by the sea. And my dear friends, I would like to remind you that I introduced memberships on my channel, and if you want to communicate with me in a more close way, you can choose one of 5 tiers, and join our community of sane people. In 2010 and in 2011, there were quite a lot of news on the Russian media that the Council of Europe banned the words mother and father from using in official documents. So if a family had to fill in some official documents, they had to use the name parent 1 and parent 2. And you know, my dear friends, 12 years passed and the Russian president uses this topic in every speech he is delivering on TV. You know, this is quite a big point in his thinking, I don't know what. So he uses it every single speech, like parent 1 and parent 2. And this, our Russian media says that not very good, not very good. But of course, I don't think that it's completely true that the word mother and father were banned, actually banned in official documents in Europe. Is this true? Really? Give your comments. Really? Do you have to use parent 1 and parent 2 in your official documents? I think that may have been taken out of the context. Also, the Russian media says that there are a lot of gays and lesbians in Europe, and that there is propaganda, very vast propaganda among people to become lesbians and gays. You know, from my point of view, I don't understand if you can become a gay or a lesbian by watching something. I don't know, I'm not an expert in this, you know, but the Russian media says that propaganda affects the state of minds of people, especially a child's mind. So the next big point on the Russian news is that children in the Western countries are forced to identify their gender other than female and male, and that they are allowed to change their gender, like gender and sex, by making surgeries in their childhood. And you know, of course, I think that a child mind is not very stable. So of course that that decision must be postponed until child is grown up and he or she can take decisions by their experience and not by something, by their wish, you know. I live in Russia and I really don't know if that's true, that gender reassignment is forced upon children in Europe. Really don't know, but Russian media says that, exactly that. The other big point for Russian media is migrants from Africa in Europe. So they always tell Russians that migrants from Africa are fleeing in great quantities to Europe, and that they get money for doing nothing in Europe. So they get benefits from the European government for doing nothing. And they always ask Russians, do you want the same? Do you want migrants fleeing to Russia in such quantities as they flee to Europe? And I was like, we have that. Yes, we don't have migrants from Africa, but we have migrants from Middle Asia, and they flee to Russia in great quantities. Also, they however, they don't get benefits from the Russian government, of course, because even some Russians don't get benefits from Russian government. I mean, those Russians who need that. And of course, the migrants from Middle Asia have to work, but sometimes they occupy workplaces that were meant for Russians, but for example, in construction, they want to reduce their costs. That's why they hire migrants from Middle Asia and not Russian. And this is the other point for the Russian media, saying that the migrants from Africa who actually want to work, they get the jobs that were meant for Europeans. For example, I don't know in which program I saw that on YouTube, but the Russian state media had a news report from Europe, and they took an interview from a woman, an old lady. There was a translation of her words. So she told that she was fired from her work because she was close to the retirement age, and that her job was given to a migrant from Africa. But when the same woman was found by other company, like from Europe, and they showed her this news report from Russia, she was like, they completely messed my words. I didn't say that my job was given to a migrant from Africa. I told them that I actually retired and my job place was free for anyone who wanted to take it. And of course, we cannot skip the topic of winter and the Russian gas. So in spring, summer, and autumn, there were a lot of discussions about how Europe will freeze without Russian gas. So there were a lot of news reports, like live shows. They even created memes of how Russians will be enjoying winter in their warm apartments, how they will be enjoying hot baths while Europeans will be freezing in their cold houses, and will go back to the Middle Ages in terms of hygiene, because they will not be able to get baths and showers anymore. And of course, now we see that winter has come, and Europeans are having baths still. They are not freezing in their apartments. Yes, of course, the electric bills, the other bills are now much higher than they were before. But as far as I know, this year, even Russians in their warm apartments were experienced the double rise of bills, especially for water, electricity, and other kinds of services. So, yeah. And the topic that got really huge in Russian media in summer was the topic of Russophobia in Europe. So the Russian news told Russians that Russians who lived in Europe were humiliated because they were Russians, that they were not allowed to speak out their position, their opinion on what's happening in Ukraine, that some Russians were denied some services, that some Russians were denied in getting jobs, that some Russian books and music that was written like 100 years ago was banned in Europe. When I was in Bulgaria, I didn't experience any Russophobia. Maybe you can tell me if there is Russophobia in Europe. So, my dear friends, give your comments on Russophobia in Europe. I'm really interested if you, for example, maybe you are Russian and you live in Europe and maybe you experience some Russophobia. I'm really interested to know that. So, by the way, do you want the same video about America, how Russian media depicts America for Russians? So if you would like to know that, please leave your comments down below too. So when I was reading those comments saying that the Western media depicts Russia as an evil, I was always thinking, do you guys understand that it's the same in Russia towards the Western countries? So the Russian media says that Western countries are enemies. They depict them as evil. They say that the Western countries want Russia to collapse. So now I think those people who didn't know that the Russian media depicts European countries as evil too, now you understand that it's the same from the Russian side. So, my dear friends, thank you for watching, thank you for being with me, and thank you for all your likes, subscriptions, and joining memberships. And my dear friends, see you in the next video.